Coaching Lounge. Take your place in the Coaching Lounge. Be inspired by discussions with motivational guests, compelling speakers, key people of influence, and models of success. Learn unique processes, strategies, and tips that will transform your life. Tune into previous episodes on www.thecoachinglounge.co.uk. Like our page on Facebook via The Coaching Lounge. Follow us on Twitter @SatelliteCoach. Thank you for joining your host, Rebecca Gordon, in The Coaching Lounge. Tune in, relax, engage, and transform your life now. Do you wish you were a better public speaker who could wow a crowd? Have you ever had to speak in front of an audience and felt as if you were quaking in your shoes at the mere thought of this? Have you ever turned down an opportunity to give a talk due to the fear that you might not come across at your best? Well, you're not alone. Glossophobia, which is the term for the fear of public speaking, is a common experience that affects at least 75% of the population. A fear of public speaking can stop someone from taking advantage of opportunities at work, in an academic setting, or in the social arena. I'm your host, Rebecca Gordon, and I'm joined in the Coaching Lounge today by someone who was forced to overcome her fear of public speaking due to being catapulted into the public arena. I particularly want to explore with Jill Vanderwood the best way to use your voice effectively and for maximum impact. So if you want to improve your communication skills and feel sensational as a speaker, then stay tuned right until the end of this podcast, because you'll hear some great information on how you can use your voice to maximum effect. Jill, welcome to the Coaching Lounge.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. Thank you for joining me. And when we first communicated to set up this interview, you told me that you were in Mountain Dew Time. And I must admit I was completely baffled. I've never heard of Mountain Dew Time before. So what time zone is that? Where exactly in the world are you, Jill?
It's Mountain Daylight, and it's in Utah, USA.
Oh, right. Okay. So Mountain Daylight, because I saw on your email, I think it came up as Mountain Dew Time. Okay. So you're in Utah, okay, in the USA. So how is it there today? How are you? How is it?
It's a beautiful day, and I'm just doing great.
Excellent. Good. Okay. Well, I'm really glad that you've joined us all the way from Utah. I love being able to connect with international guests, and that's the beauty of living in this day and age, using the internet. Because what that means is that I can tap into the expertise of people worldwide to acquire great information and knowledge and insight on topics that can help listeners who tune into the Coaching Lounge podcast to really excel at who they are, to get better at what they do. So I'm really honored to have you share your expertise with me today. And importantly, with the listeners tuning in who might quake in their boots at the very thought of speaking in front of a crowd. So let's just start off the interview, Jill, and I'm going to start off by asking you about your experience as an author, because I think that was a primary thing that led you into public speaking. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so tell me about your work as an author, some of the books you've written. Give me a little bit of information about your background, please.
Okay, I am an author, but I didn't publish my first book until I was in my mid-50s. So I hadn't had any of these experiences until late in life. And when I decided to publish my first book, I learned a lot about marketing. So when I published my first fiction book, it was through the rug. and it's a children's adventure with their grandmother. And I was already a grandmother, so that's the reason I wrote that for my grandchildren. And I learned a lot about marketing at that time because I was doing a lot of things that I had to learn to do. And I decided I knew enough about marketing that I could teach a workshop. So I had all these ideas. I'm going to teach this workshop. And then all of a sudden, I volunteered and realized I don't know how to speak in front of people at all. And I was terrified. So I decided to join a Toastmasters group and learn about speaking. And I had 6 months to prepare for my first workshop.
Okay, that's superb. Okay, and that's great inspiration. In your mid 50s. So, did you have the idea for the book to start writing this and produce it in your mid 50s, or tell me about that? Because I mean, there are so many people who have thoughts about what they want to do and think, oh, time's running out, I've left it too late, I can't do it now. But for me, who's in my 50s, to hear that you wrote and published your first book in your mid 50s, that's massive. That's a great inspiration to me. So what brought you to that point, please? What brought you there?
Well, it was my grandchildren. I was telling them stories, and then I decided that I wanted to write them down. And so I went to some writing workshops and classes and learned about writing, and they inspired me on this idea, and I decided to write it. So I found a publisher and published this first book, and then after that, I started almost every year publishing a book. So I decided that I probably had the gift of writing all along, but raising my children and working and doing all other things, I kind of pushed it aside. And
Right, I see. So how many books have you written, Jill?
I'm publishing 2 books this year, so I have 6. That'll make 8.
Wow, isn't that fantastic? That's amazing. Okay, so they're all children's books, are they?
No, Shaking Behind the Microphone, Overcoming the Fear of Public Speaking was my first adult book.
Right, okay. That's the focus for our topic today. And it will be great to have you on to talk specifically about the process of writing and publishing to help anyone who wants to learn the craft or to develop their skills and, confidence in doing that. So you realized actually that wow, I've got things I want to share with people about my experience about marketing, and you said that you wanted to teach a workshop on marketing. So what was your early experience as a public speaker? What specifically told you that it was worthwhile acquiring the skills to do this formally?
It was mainly that I had a lot to say and I wanted to learn how to say it in front of people. So my first experience teaching this workshop, I was at the conference. I had been scheduled to do 2 workshops, and the first one was on marketing, and I had written down everything that I wanted to say, and I thought I was ready. But when I got into the room, I had been told by other workshop presenters that they only had 2 people in their workshop. So I thought, I'll have my sister-in-law and my friend, and then I'll be just great. I can talk to 2 people just fine.
Okay. Right.
But the room filled up.
Oh, well, that's
And there
great.
were, yeah, there were well-known authors in the room. And here I was just new at this and new at speaking. And I felt like I don't know if I have anything that these people will want to hear because they have a lot more experience than I did.
So I'm imagining there was a great feeling of trepidation. What were some of the physical feelings, the physical symptoms of the fear at that time for you?
Well, I had decided that I had a kind of a lump in my throat, so I took an allergy pill and it made my mouth completely dry. So my lip was stuck to my teeth and I kept trying to drink water and remember what I was saying, and my notes fell on the floor, so they were all out of order by that time. and I would sit down and I would stand up. I was just kind of falling apart, but I kept going and I kept going, and I taught this for a whole hour. And at the end, I talked to somebody, and this man said that you seemed a little nervous at first, but then you kind of loosened up and you were just fine. But to me, I didn't think I'd ever loosened up.
Yeah, because it can be terrifying, can't it? It can feel terrifying to be in front of an audience, and even if it's probably, 10 or 20 people, it might just seem so magnified, like there's 50 or 100 people in front of you. So, when you're standing in front of a crowd, I mean, you got through the physical feelings, didn't you? And you were persistent, and you kept going and kept going, and it became easier.
Yes, it did. Well, the thing that I felt at the end of that, I was kind of emotional and I was kind of almost hyperventilating, and I did it,
Right.
you know. I did it, and that was the thing that I accomplished. I had done that. I stood up there for a whole hour and talked to these people. And I was so feeling so accomplished, but yet so nervous inside still.
Yeah. So I suppose, I mean, in everything we do, there were some key learning points. So for you, you realized actually I need to learn this art formally, really.
Yes, I had already been in Toastmasters, but the thing about Toastmasters, even though it gets you practice and speaking in front of people, your talks are only maybe 3 to 5 minutes. So preparing for an hour is a lot different.
Okay, okay. So let's just talk about that then, because what I want to focus on now are the stages before getting in front of an audience. What can someone do to, let's just break it into segments here, to physically, mentally, and emotionally prepare themselves for speaking publicly? And just to define, when we say speaking publicly, for me, it's not just a massive audience. It could be even a couple of people, and 5, 10, a dozen people, but just speaking outside of an ordinary setup. So, what can someone do to physically, mentally, and emotionally prepare themselves, Jill?
Would you like me to go through my 10 tips here?
Yeah, what we can do, let's just because I think, let me just rewind a little bit. When I recently coached someone, a client of mine, one of the things we spoke about is the presence of the audience and how that might seem to someone. So we spoke about some strategies to actually put that in the right perspective, and also what you've got to tell yourself in your mind, maybe some of the beliefs that you have to prepare yourself to, just to boost your confidence, and also emotionally, just firing yourself up. So if you can just touch off, let's just talk about maybe the first three that we can mention from your list of 10, because we may want to analyze them a little bit, if that's okay.
Okay. Well, before I go into that, I want to tell you that what I do in the beginning is I write down every word that I want to say
Okay.
when I'm going to speak. And I type that out, and then I print it out and I read it every day, several times a day. I read it all the way through, and then I'll time myself, and then sometimes I'll even listen to myself, because that way you can hear if you're saying and too much, or you're saying or
Mhm.
stuttering or anything. You
Yeah.
can hear that because you can't hear that in yourself for some reason.
Yeah. One of my idiosyncrasies is right, right, right. And I cringe whenever I play back my podcasts and hear myself say that. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
we all do it.
Yeah.
And then after I have it all printed out and I've read it through many, many, many times and timed myself, then I will take key points and I will print those out and just maybe a few words that remind me of the topic. And that way, if I lose my place, I can go back and I can just start from any point.
Right. So that's a good tip, actually. So what you're doing, you write every word down, practice that, and then scale it down so that if you do get off track, it's easier to pick up and just go back to a point because the context of what you wanted to say specifically.
Yes. And
Yes.
then with those, they need to be big and bold so that they catch your eye because you only have a few seconds to glance at that.
Right. In terms of the notes that you have. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So they're not really notes, they're just bullet points
Right,
at that
okay.
point.
Yes, I've got you. Great, excellent. Okay, fantastic. And then what follows that?
Then I practice with that, with the bullet points. If you don't give yourself enough time to go through, then you're nervous even more because you're not prepared and you
Mm.
don't know your topic.
Hmm. So preparation, planning is key, yeah, naturally in the process. Excellent. Okay. Anthony Robbins, I was listening to one of his recordings some time back, and as you have said, he said the key is to practice. And he said, practice in front of a mirror. And as you practice, be very animated. Move your hands, move your body, and emphasize your words. He said, really get into the feeling that you're giving a great talk. So feel it physically. This
Mhm.
is something that can tremendously boost confidence. What would you say to that? What are your thoughts?
I think that's really good because then you know what other people are seeing. If you're
Right.
doing some funny facial expression, you'll catch that.
Yes, absolutely. Excellent. Okay, so we've got some great tips from Jill already. If you're preparing and planning to give a public talk, it's very important to go through the process of writing down every word that you want to say. Read that, practice that, rehearse that several times a day, and listen to yourself, record yourself, and then scale it down to bullet points. And I think that's a fabulous process, which means that you won't get lost, because it's quite normal, I think, sometimes to have a blank, to forget what you might want to talk about, to forget an important point, especially if you might have a question from the audience and you get off track. So Jill's key points will help anyone who's in that environment of public speaking to really get back on track. So thank you for that, Jill. What we are going to do now is have a short break, and then we will return to actually talk a bit more about communication. And Jill, I have two questions from Coaching Lounge listeners who knew you were going to be with me today and wanted to get some support with their development of public speaking. So we'll be back on the other side of this brief announcement.
Think big for a moment. If you could create your best life, how would this look? What if, in just 30 minutes, you had a plan of action to get closer to your dream? Make the impossible possible and claim your free session today. Visit www.satellitelifecoaching.com now.
We're in the coaching lounge, and I'm joined by Jill Vanderwood, who is talking to us today about being a better public speaker. Jill, I'm going to read a quote which I came across, and I'm going to touch upon this quote by asking a question. So the quote is this, and it's by Sidney J. Harris. The two words information and communication are often used interchangeably, but they signify quite different things. Information is giving out, communication is getting through. So you've already spoken to us about preparing to give a talk. I just want to check with you then, Jill, if communication is about getting through what you want to say, if communication is that process, what, in your opinion, are ingredients in the blueprint for being an impactful and engaging communicator?
Well, I'm going to go to this point where I've been at a lot of people's talks where they actually got up there and read their notes. They didn't look at the audience. They didn't engage the audience. So I would say it would be engaging your audience. I looked at this man that was reading, and then in the middle of his talk, I guess he became more confident. So he started looking up and talking to the audience, but he had already lost them. Everyone was either fidgeting, or they were reading something else, or they were doing something else. And so engaging your audience or communicating, I would say you have to make eye contact, and maybe one thing I do is smile. If you smile, that comes through on your voice, and it warms you up to the audience also. And sometimes another thing you can do at the very beginning, if you have a smaller group, you can have them introduce themselves. If you have them introduce themselves, that kind of takes the nervousness away from you. And each person, when they're coming up to speak, their turn is coming up, they are nervous. So they're thinking more about what they're going to say. And that takes that pressure off of you.
Right, okay. I'm just going to touch on something you said there about introducing yourself. Just to add to what you've said, I recall when I went to Romania for the first time, and in the very first delivery that I did, there were probably about 10 people in the room at the time to begin with. And just as you said, I purposely, before the talk began, before the session started, I purposely went to each individual and shook their hands, had a little bit of a, maybe a few seconds talk. And that was great because it was a good icebreaker. It broke the ice. And it meant that when I started to deliver, I felt some instant rapport with them. There was some connection already. So they were attuned to me and were listening a little bit more keenly to what I had to say than if it started off cold. So I think that is a great benefit if it's a smaller audience and if there is time to do that. And that works well for you. Is that something that you do generally most of the time? When it gets to a bigger audience, how do you adapt that? How do you modify that approach?
I didn't do that with a larger audience when I'm up on a stage, but I will do other things, like I started out with some music that kind of set the scene, and it had to do with my speaking. There's a song called Brave, and I want to see you be brave, and I use that song at the very beginning, and that kind of breaks the ice and sets the mood for my talk. In the middle of the talk, I will do things like I will demonstrate. One of my tips is to think of something that scares you even more than public speaking. So I went skydiving. So I will get up on the stage and I will pretend like I'm going to jump off the airplane and describe my feelings and how that helped me to overcome my fear, because now I can say that I went skydiving from 12,000 feet up in the mountains, and I was able to use that as a thing to make me not afraid of public speaking.
That's fantastic. Wow, from 12,000 feet. Wow, that must have been an experience. But yeah, so when you remember and recall that you've put yourself in, what I can imagine was probably an incredibly fearful situation and experience, then public speaking is just a drop in the ocean, isn't it? It's nothing really.
Yes, yes, it's really nothing now. I can say I'm not afraid of these people.
Yeah.
I went skydiving.
Fantastic. Okay, so I mean, all these points are really helpful, Jill. Thank you so much. So just before I ask this question from the listener, um, these strategies and techniques that you're sharing with us today, are some of these the things that you? Because I've not actually been to a Toastmasters meeting. I've wanted to go to one for such a long time now, which I will need to, move my actions on. So are these some of the things that you learn when you visit Toastmasters?
No, the Toastmasters group was just to make you aware of your audience and how to write a speech and how to present it. And then after you do your short speech, then they will analyze it. So
Okay.
they will
Yeah.
they have somebody actually counting how many times you say.
All right. Okay. So it
And
helps. Sorry, carry on.
yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say it's very supportive for the practical approach in public speaking.
Yes.
Yes, okay, okay. So let me ask you this question. It's actually an excellent question, Jill. One that I know your response will help me with as well. So this is a question from a Coaching Lounge listener, and it says, the question is, how do you control the sound, tone, and vibration of your voice as you get part way through speaking publicly? For example, you might start off strong and confident, then part way through, your voice starts to waver and becomes light, and you feel a little bit out of breath, like, your last breath is slipping away, the words are slipping away. So, what are the best methods of control, Jill?
I would say to use one of those things to break the ice again. If you're starting to lose your confidence or you lose your train of thought or you can't find your place on your notes, then I would say to do something like call on somebody from the audience and have them talk for a minute on, just pick a topic and say, I would like somebody to come up and tell about their first public speaking experience or something.
Mm,
And then while they're doing that, take a drink of water, get some breaths, and do something that calms you down and look at your notes, and then you'll be ready to go again.
okay, so it's just having some sort of break, some interjection where you can actually get some time to gather, to regather and refocus.
You can also do that in advance. You can ask somebody in advance and tell them that you will call on them.
All right. Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. One other strategy I'm just going to add to that, and I read this somewhere. I can't remember where I read it, but it is when you're speaking, make each word count. So, measure the words if you like. So make every word meaningful. So the audience, imagine that the audience is, really listening to each individual word that you say. Because one of the things that can happen, I know I've been in this situation myself, is where you're speaking and you're racing with your words, thinking that you've got to get everything out. Otherwise, people
Mm-hmm.
might get bored, they might not want to listen to you.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it was when I was at my father's funeral and reading his eulogy that the priest gave me some great advice. He said, if in your head you think you're speaking too slowly, then actually that's the right pace to remain speaking at. And that has helped me when when I've needed to measure my words to make every word count. So it stops me from rushing ahead because I know that what is being said is beneficial for others, it's meaningful, and I need to measure it so people get it. So just to add that on, if that's okay to do as a strategy, that has helped
Yes.
me. Yeah, yeah. So the second question from another listener is this. It's quite similar to the first, and she's asked, "What do you do if the audience seemingly becomes disinterested?" Because she said that she's been in such a situation where it's felt like, and you've said it before actually, you think people are fidgeting, people might actually get up and go to the toilet, but you think they're leaving your talk because it's so boring. Okay, and that can be a real blow to someone's confidence. So again, what are your ideas for some approaches to remain confident in those types of situations?
I would have an exercise like I said about my experience of the skydiving. I got up on the edge of the stage and talked about my toes. They told me to put my toes on the line, and then I looked down and my toes were actually in the air, and then I demonstrated, or have some kind of a break, a funny thing, or a distraction. And then all of a sudden they're paying attention again.
Okay, great. Okay. And what's the greatest amount of people that you've spoken to, Jill, in an audience?
I can't quite tell you how many, but I know I've done school assemblies, so it's the whole school, and I've done the writing group, the League of Utah Writers, and I did the whole lunchtime session. So they had their tables set up, and they were all sitting at the table. So I would say maybe 150.
Right.
That's a
Okay.
guess, though.
Yeah. And I mean, if you've spoken at school assemblies, I mean, young people, children are some of the hardest people to keep engaged, aren't they? So
Yes,
that
yes.
is a great achievement. Fantastic. Okay. So what we are going to do now, Jill, is that we're going to have another short break, and we're going to come back just to finish off the interview and find out more about your book and get your contact details, and we'll be back on the other side after this break.
Usually, we struggle through life alone, with outdated beliefs and self-sabotaging actions that bring the same results. How different would it be if you had a personal success coach who helped you make the shift and create a plan for happiness? You will fearlessly align your values, achieve important goals, and reframe your perspective when you have coaching with me. Email Rebecca at info@satellitelifecoaching.com. Book your free discovery session and change your life.
Okay, Jill, thank you for joining me today. I'm really loving the things that you're telling me about developing the confidence and the skill to speak publicly. And I know that you you're experienced in doing this. You've been doing this for has it been some considerable years now since you wrote your first book?
It was 10 years since my first book came out.
Okay. So tell me then, for you, for Jill Vanderwood, who stands in front of an audience, what's your speaking style?
Oh, I didn't think about that one.
Okay. Right.
Well, one of the things that I do is I make sure that I have a put together outfit that looks good on me so that I'm not thinking about myself. I'm thinking about my audience and I'm thinking about my talk. And I know that they are there because they want to hear what I have to say. And I know that I tell myself I have something important to say, and that's why they're here. So,
I mean, the reason why I've asked that question, when I reflect back, and when I've been to large gatherings where I've been an audience member, and there have been people on stage presenting to about 5,000 people. I have on one situation, I visited one event 3 or 4 times, the same event 3 or 4 times over a period of time. And the first time it was to enjoy it, to be a participant. The second time it was similar, to enjoy it, be a participant and learn. But the third time I specifically went to observe the style of the speakers, because I was starting to run and deliver my own personal development courses, and I just wanted to get some awareness of what some of the particular things were that people did, that naturally fitted in with who they were. So that's why I'm asking the question, really. So for example, there's one speaker who comes to mind quite strongly, and he was very lively, very bubbly, coming into the audience, even though it was speaking to thousands of people, and really making that connection on that level. as opposed to remaining on the stage, and one other person who would walk the stage and walk across it, walk across it, walk across it, just own the stage. I remember another person who would just stand and maybe, as you've said before, invite and include the audience at times to take part by asking questions. So for me, because I'm a coach and I love asking questions and that's my job, when
Mhm.
I'm doing my talks, what I notice that I do a lot of is that I tell a story. I might give an emotive experience, something that's really impacted on me, and share it with the audience. But a lot of the times, I tend to want people to develop their thinking about what I've said. So I might introduce some questions. So I'm thinking, like, when I'm talking about style, for me, my particular style is more the probing, questioning, as well as a talking approach. Does that make sense?
Yes, and when you're saying that, that reminds me that that's more my style also. I
Right.
love to tell stories. I'm a writer, so I love to tell stories and I love to engage the audience, and I also love to ask questions.
Excellent. Yeah, okay. Because I think it's important to get across that I and I'm going to declare I have never been to Toastmasters. I've never been to any public speaking, school, if you like. However, what we're talking about here is the old adage, people by people. So it's to make
Hmm.
yourself relational, and personable to people in the audience. So it could be that you might tell a story, like you've said, you're a storyteller, include stories, you might ask questions. And something I discussed with my coaching clients when his objective was to improve his public speaking skills was to do some, I mean, naturally, you know what you're going to talk about, you know the topic, you know the subject, but to make sure you do your research to bring in some key words. Yeah, key words that the audience can resonate with, that immediately, they can pick up on. What are your thoughts on that?
That is a good idea. If you are just going to go up there and quote people and spew out facts, you're not going to get your audience interested. So if you think of words that have to do with your talk and ask them what they think about those words, or is this something that puts an image in your mind, that might be a good way to do it.
That's right, absolutely. Excellent. Thank you so much, Jill. Okay, so here's a question for you, Jill. Have you ever heard of Pecha Kucha?
Say that again.
Have you heard of something called Pecha Kucha?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I'm just going to explain for yourself and for the audience. It's a great concept, and I only came across it myself about a few years ago. Okay, so what it is that it's a concept that was started in Tokyo in 2003, and the aim of that concept was to give local designers a platform to give their presentations. So this is the thing about Pecha Kucha. The presenter, he actually shows 20 slides, and each of those slides are only presented on for 20 seconds. So the Pecha Kucha concept is 20-20. 20 seconds for each slide, and that's 20 slides. So I went along to a Pecha Kucha event once, and after the event, I was speaking to one of the presenters, and I said, "Oh, that was great. Weren't you nervous?" And she said, "Well, actually, I was, but I remembered something that someone told me, a tip to keep myself confident." And she said that she was told that when you're giving a talk, 99.9% of the time, the audience wants you to do well. They're keen to hear what you have to share. So focus on the 99.9% rather than the 0.01%. And I think the key is to remember the bigger picture. People really do want to hear what you have to share with them. What are your thoughts on that, Jill?
My thoughts are that they wouldn't take their time out to come to your presentation. There are so many other things they could be doing. If your talk wasn't important to them, they wouldn't be there.
Absolutely great. Okay, so let's just talk about your book then, Jill. And it's a great title, by the way, Shaking Behind the Microphone. Fantastic title. So you were inspired to write this book because of your experience. I'm interested to know, because I'm picking up from what you said earlier. You said that I wanted to run some workshops based on marketing. Okay. So
Yes,
similarly, do you now, you've written the book, do you run workshops based on public speaking?
I do.
Okay.
I talk to people about public speaking, and I still do marketing and other writer related things too. But I speak a lot about the public speaking.
Okay. And what are some of the, I'm thinking of the question really. What are some of the? I think we can all perhaps identify with some of the challenges that people have, at the thought of speaking publicly. But when they've gone to your workshops, tell me some of the key awareness or learning points that people say have helped them to improve their skill or confidence as a result of attending your workshops.
Mostly they just tell me that about their experience and how scared they were, and that they realize that if I can overcome mine, that they can too. But a lot of people say that they'll never do it. They still say
Right.
they never do it.
Okay. But this is the interesting thing, though, Jill, and this is what I wanted to say, and I think I mentioned it before, that for me, you can share with me your thoughts. For me, public speaking, it automatically presents the idea that it might be a large, massive crowd, yes, of 50 or hundreds or thousands even. However, public speaking, we can say it could be about speaking at a team meeting at work. Yeah, it could
Yes.
be about speaking to your peers in your study group at university, a group of a few people, really. So let's put the public speaking to one side for a minute in the context of, hundreds or thousands of people, and really focus on speaking, communicating to a smaller group, a smaller gathering. Yeah, because this can actually stop someone from getting a promotion, if you like, from doing well. If one of their modules or one of their assignments is to give a presentation, to a small room of people, the very thought of standing up in front of a few people can actually stop people from doing well. So, because you've mentioned, okay, some people have said, oh, I still wouldn't, do public speaking. I just want you to probably talk to the listeners today about anything that can absolutely help them when it comes to having to speak up in a meeting at work, speak up at university, or even if you're gathering socially with a group of 3 or 4 friends, or new friends, if you like, new people that you've met, to be able to speak up and make your voice be heard. Um, what can you tell the listeners about that?
Sometimes if you're in a PTA meeting, or you're a soccer mom, or you're doing something at work, if you're not the one that speaks up, somebody is going to. They're going to say what you wanted to say, or they're going to say the opposite. And if you don't defend your view, nobody will. So if you have something to say, then you can practice that in front of the mirror before you go to the meeting. But it is important that you have a voice, and you need to know that you can use your voice. So I say practice in front of your cat. Practice in front of your family. Get people that you're comfortable with, or set up a bunch of stuffed animals in the room, but practice. And practice using your voice. One of the things that I do is on my way is to speak to myself in the car. I'm practicing my voice. I'm making sure that it's heard and that I can project it a little bit. And if you have no microphone, you really do have to project your voice. You have to talk loud.
So really, we need to deliberately put ourselves in situations where we are allowing our voices to be heard, really. And the first thing to do is to start off by doing that in a safe space, in a small, intimate space, a personal space, really. So that we're preparing for the space that we are forced to be in for the talk itself.
Yes, we need to
Yes.
practice.
Yeah. Just sharing a story here. When you were saying that, what came to mind for me was these meetings that I told I used to go to where, the presenter would speak to 5,000 people in the room, and I was the audience member, the participant. We did lots of exercises, lots of activities, lots of singing as well. Okay. And I distinctly remember when it was a 5-day event, I left the event, was driving along in my car and just singing. And my voice seemed so much louder. It seemed to be 2-3 times more projected, more voluminous than normal. And I think that was because in that 5-day period, I was in an environment where no one was afraid to sing, to shout, to really, give it their all. And that then I think if that's something that someone continues to do, then they normally will feel okay, about hearing their voice or, using their voice anywhere really. Yeah, so
Yes, that's right.
that was a distinct awareness and key learning for me. Excellent. So, Jill, for anyone who's interested in reading your book, Shaking Behind the Microphone, or finding out more about what you do, can you please share your contact details? Thank you.
Yes, the name of the book is called Shaking Behind the Microphone, Overcoming the Fear of Public Speaking. And in this book, I share other people's stories, such as a rabbi and a man who was in several men that are in business that almost lost their jobs because they couldn't speak. And I share a lot of people who tell their tips how to overcome the fear besides mine. And I also have experts that I've interviewed about public speaking. So you get all kinds of information and tips from lots of different people, as well as from a nutritionist who said that once she changed her diet, she didn't have the anxiety that she used to have. And I also interviewed a man who is a hypnotist, and he has about 90% of his clients get better, overcome fear with his hypnotism, and he doesn't put them under. So I have all of those people together and all that information, and you can find my website at jillvanderwood.com. And my book, Shaking Behind the Microphone, is also available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com.
Excellent. Okay, great. And Jill, just before you leave us today and depart from the coaching lounge, let me just ask you to share some final thoughts. If there's one thing you would say to someone to do or to think or to be aware of that would help them raise their confidence in situations where they have to use their voice, what's that thing?
I think it is to never say no to an opportunity, to say yes and then figure out what you're going to do. And I would highly recommend going to Toastmasters, because you can't go to a meeting without participating. They put you in a position where you're counting the ums and ahs, or you're the timer, you time how long their speeches are and that sort of thing. So you're always doing something, and that will put you in a position where you're with other people who were also in your same position. They were afraid to, and they are very loving and understanding of where you are.
Excellent. Jill Vanderwood, thank you so much for joining me in the Coaching Lounge. Goodbye.
The Coaching Lounge.
Take your place in the Coaching Lounge. Be inspired by discussions with motivational guests, compelling speakers, key people of influence, and models of success. Learn unique processes, strategies, and tips that will transform your life. Tune into previous episodes on www.thecoachinglounge.co.uk. Like our page on Facebook via The Coaching Lounge. Follow us on Twitter @SatelliteCoach. Thank you for joining your host, Rebecca Gordon, in The Coaching Lounge. Tune in, relax, engage, and transform your life now.